and welcome to SalesTV USA again.
And Canada edition.
And Canada edition. Tim is dialing in instead of from the UK. He's dialing in from Canada today, which is fantastic.
I'm in Vancouver.
That is a way to make it authentic, isn't it? Let's ship somebody over.
I've flown here deliberately just to do this show, and then no, I'm not doing that.
When are we doing the Australia version? Because I'm prepared to take one for the team.
Yeah, I'll join you.
Yeah. So before we go any further, let's all introduce ourselves. I'm Adam Gray, co-founder of DLA Ignite, and the host today, Andy.
Andy Huth, lecturer in sales leadership and performance at Cranfield University, founder of the Institute of Sales Professionals.
Tim.
I'm Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I'm known for being the author of the book Social Selling Techniques for Influence Buyers and Changemakers.
And you're in Vancouver today.
And I'm in Vancouver, live from Vancouver, yeah.
Rob.
Hi, all. I'm Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results, and I am the U.S. representative of today's show.
And last but by no means least, Alex.
Thank you. Alex Abbott, founder of Sapiro. I'm a partner of DLA Ignite. I'm also a fellow of the Institute of Sales Professionals, and not yet known as the bearded sales guy.
But shortly will be known as the bearded sales guy for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
How would we tell you two apart then? Would that?
Well, I'm the handsome.
That's going to cause difficulty.
Yeah.
I'm the handsome bearded sales guy.
You are the handsome version, yeah.
It's the hair bun.
Got it.
Yeah.
The man bun.
For some of us, that's a truly offensive thing, for obvious reasons.
I'm growing it longer so I can share some for you, Adam. I'm thinking of you.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. That's very kind. So in our UK show this morning, we had a really interesting conversation, and loads of people from the audience came back with interesting challenges and perspective on what it was that we were talking about. So do you want to lead off with that, Andy? Because you were the one that came up with the idea of what we were going to talk about.
It's been a long time since this morning.
You've had a sleep as well.
I have had a sleep, actually. Remind me, Adam, go for it, yeah? You tell me what we were going to talk about, and I'll tell you if I remember that and agree.
Well, your idea was that we were going to talk about sales and the fact that it's having an existential crisis at the moment. But actually, where we ended up was the idea of lifetime value of salespeople. So you showed your McKinsey graph, and you said
there were some slides I saw circulating when I.
Yes, exactly. That was the McKinsey graph, and you said rather flippantly, McKinsey have said this, therefore it must be true.
And I am being slightly flippant.
But actually, what they have said here is totally true, isn't it?
Yeah. It came out of some work that a company asked me to look into and then go and present to all of their portfolio companies, so a venture capitalist. And what we were looking at is, and we discussed it, I think, last week, which was on the European edition, which was actually your product's quite susceptible to being copied quite quickly these days. So that's not a differentiator. And whilst pricing strategies can be unique, they can also be copied. The processes that sales organizations employ tend to be not differentiators. And then the platforms that those processes are based on certainly aren't, because those platforms sell to many hundreds of thousands of customers, so they're kind of table stakes. And so really it's your people. And there's not a lot of research, there's not a lot of data that says, what does a salesperson cost you? And if you looked after them in a better way, what can you get back from that? And I was testing and I stumbled on this because in literature, I sound like Michael Caine there, an educating reader, in literature, there is quite a bit around customer lifetime value. Now, it's complex as hell because the equations on it, and I wasn't that particularly strong in maths, are long and quite complicated. But then when you dig around in all of that, you stumble on this McKinsey thing. And what it basically says is that, you've got the ability to recruit somebody, you then got to accelerate their performance. You then have to keep them engaged and develop and increase their productivity, and then they're going to inevitably leave. If you look at desktop research using LinkedIn, I know you guys are all prevalent around it. It tends to show that most frontline salespeople will leave an organization. Most people who progress through management will stay. So that they're 10 years longer. And it also then hints at, we did some work that with people like UPS and everything, that actually when salespeople leave you, they don't actually put a post-it on their head and go, you know what, I'm thinking of going. So there's actually an inevitable cognitive disengagement from them in the whole role that they've got. So they tend to be less productive for 3 months, and then your patch tends to be left barren for 3 months, or their patch, or somebody else's patch if they move somebody into that domino effect. And then obviously, again, you've got to engage somebody and accelerate their productivity. So it's about 9 months of lost revenue that goes into the
minimal, yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh,
Yeah.
And actually what they're saying is, if you could actually review people and help understand their capability as you recruited them, or even lined them up as potential candidates, then you create an individualist experience of self-development for those people. Because it doesn't say that these are all brand new people to sell. Some of these people might have been selling for 15 years. You can possibly accelerate their usefulness to you as an organization quicker. But then how do you increase their productivity? And this is where the ISP is looking at this. It's not just about training them, because we all know I hate the word. The reality about it is, how do you look after their well-being? So how you can engage them and make them feel better. We talked this morning about happier salespeople are proved to sell 13% more than unhappier people, and they're not engaged. Happier and more engaged people actually engage their customers better, and there's a one-to-one correlation in that, and there's a one-to-one correlation in revenue improvement. You then look at actually how you continue to develop people's skills, look at their customer relationship strength. There's a number of ways to measure that, but what you're doing is improving the individual, recognizing them with, as Alex said, recognition of a professional body, competence and capability, and codification of their knowledge. You keep doing that, they actually become more successful in their role. They have a better time with customers. They have more fun and enjoyment and recognition. So actually what you end up with is this blue shade, because they stay longer, of additional value that happy, contented, professionalized salespeople give you as a company. And you can actually start to put some numbers around this and actually say, treat your salespeople well, treat them as your customers, and actually you're going to get better financial returns and a whole happier place, per se, full stop. So, let's lob that out there and actually see what our audience thinks around this, because McKinsey have said it, and we all know McKinsey are very bright people, but for them to put it into a slide, I think is great, because it kind of says what professionalism in sales has been looking at for quite a while, but not really been able to articulate.
And I think...
Go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, I think it was Rob Durant said last time we did this, was that whenever you bring a salesperson on board, there is onboarding, but it's usually go and sit next to Dave and see how he uses the CRM, and then get on the phone. I'm always saying it's more than that, isn't it? And I know I'm joking a bit, but it's.
Can you share that graph again, Adam? I want to point out, one can infer 3 different areas to improve this shaded blue area, but I contend there's also a 4th one. The first way is to get them to ramp faster, so get this to be even more steep. The second is this increased productivity. If you can get that higher, that's of course better. The third is this retention piece, extend the length of their tenure. But the 4th piece that is missing is actually over here to the left of day 0. It has to do with the recruiting. Empty seats don't fill quota. If you can hire better and faster, you actually start this first day here. and you improve that blue section as well. And I haven't read the McKinsey report to know whether or not that element is discussed, but in my experience working with organizations, helping them source sales talent, it's the ones that are clear on their hiring process that generally beat the competition for the top talent. If you have a clear and streamlined process, you're going to get the person to say yes, whereas your competitor is still dragging their feet on whether or not they even want to put an offer out there.
Great point.
Yeah. They do touch on it, Rob, and it's a great point. I like the research, I like the article, but I do think when I read it, it feels like McKinsey is still coming at it from a salesperson's perspective, and still holding the salesperson accountable for their own development. I'm not feeling like we're in this together. And there was one thing that I thought about that I wanted to kind of table and get everyone's view, not just the panel, but audience as well, is, if customer lifetime value is so important and it's considered a driving force of growth, and now we're looking at the lifetime value of a salesperson and that being a driving force of growth, why aren't we bringing those two things together and thinking about the behaviors of the salesperson and how that aligns to supporting customer lifetime value, and looking at that through the same lens?
I'd be interested in people's thoughts.
It's a great point, Alex. I agree with you. I think that it's a great diagram. Is there a link to the report somewhere that we've shared already?
No, it's not really. It's more of an article that they released. We can send that a link to the report. I think it has to be. The two things have to be connected and brought about. Yeah.
Yes, and I agree with Alex. And clearly, there's going to be a mismatch because salespeople think that the customer are on the same timeline, and they're not. It's a great piece, and I think it would be really interesting. I would be interested to sit down in my own head and work through those different points that you said, Rob, in terms of, okay, what were the things that we could do to make this one better, and what's the one thing that we could do to make this one better, and what kind of things that we can make this one better.
Yeah, I think the interesting challenge from an institute's perspective is how do you then put a framework over that?
Yeah. That
basically says, okay, because I get it, the article was written and could be construed as this lumps it all on the salesperson. Actually, as the ISP, we would go, no, this is a model for you as a sales leader or CEO. Adam, you looked at it this morning. When does the CEO get brought into this? And actually, how do you now understand as a business what levers you pull, and actually, more importantly, what returns you get as a consequence of this? And that's the why you would, that's the why you would do it, because everyone gets the reasoning that sales needs to professionalize and develop itself right now, but it's all a bit elusive because it's too hard to quantify doing the right thing.
Is it too hard to quantify, or is it too hard to do because it requires people to do something different? So, the fact that you said,
great challenge,
and I quote, it's well documented that happy salespeople outperform unhappy salespeople. Okay, that's common sense. That's stating the blindingly obvious. However, most salespeople are unhappy, and they're unhappy because they get put under ever-increasing pressure. All the people upstream of them know that they're adversely affecting their performance by heaping larger targets on them that they have no chance of achieving, and yet they still do it. Because there's still this belief that last year you made 80% of your number. This year we need to sell more stuff, so I'll increase your number, knowing that you'll make 80% of it. Actually, all that happens is you go from year to year to year feeling grossly unhappy that you shouldn't be in sales because you're never achieving what's set for you. This is fundamentally damaging to both the business and the individual, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, because we've not. There's two things businesses are afraid of. The first thing is actually letting salespeople behave and be given free choice and behave as adults. So we still treat salespeople on the whole as if they're in a classroom.
Yes.
Because we train them, and we do that because we have comfort that it's the easiest thing to control and do. And it's not, when I say control, I wouldn't say basically it's the big stick. I think people just fear that it's immeasurable and becomes this great big unwieldy thing. If you've got 10,000 salespeople, I mean, you guys worked at Oracle, yeah? Oracle's a huge sales force. If you say to Oracle Salesforce, tell you what, we're going to employ this concept called self-directed learning, and you take ownership of your own development. So you think about the soft skills, take all the product crap out of it and park that somewhere else, and the process crap about how you go follow the pricing principles and all that. But if you think about how you think about your social selling skills and capability, and if you think about your stakeholder management capability, and if you think about your trust and relationship management capability, think about these things in a competency stack. And where do you think your deficiencies are? Where would you like to focus? It causes them to have a complete meltdown, because if I've got 10,000 salespeople, just imagine we get to at least 2,000 that have rough commonality of what they want to achieve, and everybody else is all over the scatterboard. I've got how do I track it? How do I measure it? How do I measure the impact of that? Whereas if I go and get tap training, other brands available to go and do negotiation skills right away across the 10,000, I know my price, and I can look for any variation in margin and any variation in revenue, and I can go cause and effect. Thank you very much.
And I can probably get a 10% uplift for that.
Yeah,
so
for 90 days until you have to do something else, because all classroom training has been proved to go, it doesn't work because it doesn't stick. You lose 90% in 90 days because you never embed it. And so that's the big shift, Adam. The big shift is treat people as adults, but have a system in place that allows you to track what the hell's going on. And organizations have done this. Royal Mail do it really, really, really well. The equivalent of the US Postal Service do it really well. They can track individual learning with the Institute's help, shameless plug, but they do 6,500 hours plus of individualistic learning per year, and they can track it and bring it back to sales manager, so they can look at the culture of the sales management team, and then they can actually track it to performance, and it works. But it's just scary, isn't it, that we might actually have to trust salespeople and trust their learning and trust their judgment.
Yeah, what was really funny was when you said about you worked at Oracle, and this is what we have to do about empowering these people. To Tim's face when he was trying not to laugh at that. No, but that's true, isn't it? It's not criticism of them. It's the nature of large sales forces. Is that I think you said this morning when we were on a tangential conversation to this, that you invite 100,000 people to go and set their own learning objectives and their own learning pathways, and what you've got is anarchy in a business. And even though what you're hoping is that I will pick up the ball and run with it, and I realize that I need development in certain areas, and that's where I'm going to focus my learning efforts, actually most organizations, particularly established organizations, run a culture of control, don't they? It's either because they are legislating for the lowest common denominator in terms of talent. So these are your slide decks. This is how you need to present them, which kind of doesn't require a huge amount of skill to just parrot something back that you've been taught. But the idea that you might be able to help your own development is a completely alien concept in most organizations.
But that control is two ways. We're hiring those that essentially look to be controlled. So when you talk about a sales force of 10,000 and self-directed learning, if you get 2,000 picking up on it, I would consider that a tremendous success. unless that's part of the culture of the organization. The norm here is we expect you to put in 150 hours of learning each year. What that learning is, we don't know. We hardly care. We'll pay for it, but we're measuring it. But that's not the expectation. Most people are hired into an organization and expect to be told what to do.
Yeah.
And unless the organization is built around, well, we're going to provide you direction, but not dictation.
But what's fascinating
what's
fascinating about this, Rob, and you're in the US, and the US have a plethora of college, university sales programs, yeah. And I applaud that, because the rest of the world is miles behind that, and we need to follow up on that. So that's brilliant. But to that point, how can we be taking students who are learning by themselves and owning their own learning? There must be 5,000-6,000 salespeople coming out of these university programs each year, if not more. And we then immediately depower that learning and the cognitive process and go, no. We don't want you to develop. We don't want you to do continuous professional development. We don't want you to align to a set of standards. What we want you to do, exactly to Adam's point, is bloody hit a number. Got it? Great. See you later.
Come back when you've done it.
So while corporates go, you know what, I really applaud this learning. Actually, the problem is no, you don't, because you depower it. What you want is a screening program with a better educated salesperson who you've got more confidence in their competency than if you had to go and get them from the market yourself. So there's some more stuff that has to be sorted out, I think, to get that right. And there was a great paper by Young called Learning in Action, Jung, 2019, he wrote this. He looked at 29 professions and sales wasn't in it. And he worked out that to get to journey person, it takes 10 years. To get to expert in any of those fields, it takes 20.
Wow.
We don't. How many people get to journeyman, and how many companies believe that we can do that in 2 years? Sales is different. We can get to journey person in 2 years' time, and we're experts in 4. Really?
Yeah.
So these other 29 professions take 20 years and 10 years respectively, but we're different.
Matt had a great comment. There will be self-directed learning going on amongst the top individuals, whether the organization know it or not. So to provide curated, accessible material is a step towards control, not away from it. And to your point, Andy, of these students coming out of universities, don't kid yourself for 1 minute. The students are absolutely not interested in self-directed learning. They're interested in one thing only. How do I get the degree? Just tell me what to do, tell me what to study, tell me what to regurgitate, and tell me how to get out. That and the frat parties.
Yeah, I do see.
What are you doing hanging around at frat parties?
I'm an adjunct. Sometimes I get invited.
Is there an issue we need to be talking about here? Because that looks like an admission to me.
I do see more so in America and Canada, companies providing learning and development budgets to the individual, and salespeople having the freedom to spend that money how they want, within reason.
But that's really smart, isn't it? That is here's some budget for you to do whatever you want in the learning space, use it or lose it, is a good way to encourage people. Because what I see a lot of times is that training is a penance, not a reward. It's a penalty.
Oh,
yeah.
You need to log in and do your training. And large corporates have loads of training which is utterly valueless, but they do it for the sake of legals. So, your sexual discrimination training, your corruption training, your, what's good and bad training, whatever those things are, that are like, you watch them and it's so vacuous. And then The problem is that within that environment, lots of the training is a box ticking exercise. When they're going to send you on a sales training program, and it tells me stuff that I already know. It doesn't tell me anything that's particularly relevant today. But the idea of giving me my own personal budget, I can source the provider of this training program that I particularly like. I come on Sales TV and I hear Andy talking and I think that sounds like the sort of thing. Then I can reach out to Andy and I can join the ISP and I can go on a training program and spend my budget on that. That sounds perfect. And I'm bound to be excited about that in a way that I'm not going to be excited about. Here's the photocopy of the different training programs we have. Do you want to learn about sales or cookery or window cleaning or whatever it is that we've got as the corporate choices?
Budget's only half the equation. The other half of the equation is time. Are you going to provide me the time to do it?
Yeah, that's
and
good.
If you're going to provide me the time, are you going to provide me the quota relief to take that time? So all of those other elements, and we as the organization, well, we can't afford that. We can hardly afford the budget for it. And now you want to produce less as well?
Well, but that's really interesting. So Matt and I know each other well, and you've got the founding member of the ISP there, and he does some work with. Really respect Matt. Actually, what he's opened up there is some research that we're looking at, which is top CPD, so people who've been awarded with the number of hours, 24 plus, which is what you need to get certified as a professional in sales. Actually, they tend to be, and you're going to be careful about the definition of the word performance, but they tend to be the top performers in their organization. So there is a correlation between, as Matt put it in his there, correlation between top performers and learning, and it's going on. Actually, what's not happening, and what the Institute's trying to do is, and we aim to do it in the US, is actually codify that. So actually say, you know what, you've done 24 hours, whatever those 24 hours, we've tracked it. Even if you've done 48, that's absolutely brilliant, and that's great. What's really stumping is causation. So we can prove correlation, but you can't prove causation. And actually, to your point, Alex, around well-being, there's a potential that actually, if we interviewed those people, so you do your quants first and prove out the correlation, and then you interview them, is fear may drive that. Because if I'm a top performer, I'm going to find out and do anything I can not to be a fall down that performance stat.
So for those of you that are looking for correlations, there's a fantastic website that you may be familiar with called Spurious Correlations. And when you log into it, you see that there's an incredibly strong correlation between US spending on science, space and technology and suicides by hanging, strangulation and suffocation. And the two are almost identical in terms of, and there's a million different spurious correlations on here. But it's an interesting point.
Were you feeling bored then? No, minute.
No.
As a host, you logged onto a completely different website.
No, but my point is that the difference between correlation and causation is really interesting. And I remember Tim saying some years ago, we were in a conversation, and it was a flippant comment, and it was that all good salespeople seem to drive Porsches. So if you buy a Porsche, you're going to be a good salesman. And actually, it's about which end of the equation that you put this. And part of the challenge is that if you give somebody the freedom to learn the way they want to learn, there has to be a degree of guidance on this, doesn't there? Or does there? Is this about expanding your brain, and actually it matters less about what you learn and merely the fact that you are learning because it opens those neural pathways?
I think a bit of both. I think you need a bit of both, and I speak from experience there. Just touched on this morning about in 20 odd years of experience in sales, B2B sales, the company that I valued working for the most not only respected their salespeople, but actually learned from the top performing salespeople and designed their approach around those top performers and brought everybody along. And so whilst there was, let's call it directed learning, we were taught like adults. We were brought together, we were given things to do that we could go off and practice ourselves, learn ourselves and practice ourselves. But equally, we had some structured learning that we had to follow.
there's different stages of life though, Alex, and I think you've nailed it. Whereas if you come out to Rob's point, and I'm still grappling with this Will Ferrell image of him running naked down the street in the frat house thing.
Toga.
Yeah, that's my own personal therapy session. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, we're naked. Come on, there's more coming. Wife driving along. Going, yeah.
I feel seen.
There is the whole self-directed learning piece is actually broken down. So if you come out of college, to your point, Rob, completely, actually you need to highly scaffold and support young people because they don't know what they don't know. But then you go into synergistic, and an example of that is if you've been selling for 6 or 7 years, how do you set freedom in framework? Here's 10 things we think are the competencies of a sales role. Pick which 5 you need to go and do first. You feel you give them a bit more. But then you get into voluntaristic and scanning. Now, voluntaristic is a huge place. People have been telling 10 years. And that's into stuff that we talked about in other sessions, which is how do you support the sales manager to be a true coach? And how do you support them to be help reflection? And that really is a true journey of self. And you're then constantly going through that whole process of, okay, and I'm looking at Rob. Okay, Rob, so you felt that you needed to develop yourself around stakeholder management. And how have you done that? And where can I lend you some support and give you some budget to do something? And consequently, how do you, embody that, apply it somewhere, learn from that process of applying it, what went right, what didn't go right, and then what weren't you changing that? But the issue is then connected to something else, which is great that you always unpack. It says, actually, Rob doesn't trust me as a manager because Rob thinks that I'm going to ask him a question in this process or 2 questions. Well, the first question would be, what's your number? And the second question would be,
what you delivered.
Yeah. And it actually is we do need, Paul Devlin did this, and he proved that it took 6 months of those questions not being asked for Rob to trust me. And he then went, actually, this is about me. This is about my personal development, and this is great. And that goes into other kind of research that talks about servant leadership in sales. And the servant leadership and trust you have in your manager will play a big part on that diagram. That engagement and almost inspiring of people to keep them longer, it's the manager's role to actually figure out how they develop people to that.
Yeah. And it's like, to Rob's point, it starts in the hiring process. I'm amazed often to hear about sales leaders hiring people without excitedly talking about the coaching and the onboarding that they're going to get, and the strength of the value proposition that they have, and how much support they're going to get to sell. I still hear, well, we're looking for a self-starter. They need to come in and get on the phones and develop their own pipeline and make it happen.
Do you know why the hiring managers aren't excited about talking about the coaching? They don't know how.
They don't do it.
They were hired to make a number. They did that. They did that pretty well. So they got promoted into a role that has completely different skills necessary to be successful. And do you know what they get in terms of development of those skills? They tune into Sales TV. That's really about it. If they've done self-directed learning, sure, but that's not the norm. That's not the expectation.
Yeah, you're right. And I was at a conference in Holland, another one, and somebody on the panel asked, or somebody in the audience asked me a panel and goes, what's your view on sales coaching? And I went, define coaching. Because actually, when you properly get into it, there's a lot of different styles and types of coaching. And one end of it is complete transformational coaching. And if you're doing it around the individual, how prepared are you for someone to turn around and go, you know what, this is a shit job and I don't want to do it. And I'm going. And therefore, we continually, Rob, to your point, hanker and go, sales coaching, let's read a book about sports. if the All Blacks can do it and we can apply the All Black methodology in our sales team, we are doing great coaching. And he go, no, or reading the Alex Ferguson book about how he managed Manchester United for the last 30 years. Great, nailed it. That's it. I mean, you know, he was well known for kicking the tea in across the dressing room a lot of the time at half time, which I've never seen a sales manager do, thank the Lord. So, you know, we just completely misaligned to it. You're right. So we don't prepare people for that future role. And actually, back to the diagram. Yeah. How engaging would it be if we said, you know what, you might not make manager in this, so we've only got so many management roles. But if we develop your skills to be a sales manager and coaching skills, and then we look instead and actually add this kind of really weird concept that you double up on the R of retention and actually call it release. And think about it as a dove. Oh, yeah. And you go, I've contributed to you being a better, more rounded, wonderful human being that you were in the sales context, but when you joined me, and you go with my full permission and good grace to that next role that will be outside. It might even be a competitor, but I feel so wowed and amazed that I've contributed to that next step in your life. So retention, yes, we can keep it longer, but eventual release. What an empowering thought that would be. That I'm prepared to develop people for the sales community somewhere else.
But isn't the issue here that most people view these things, and we see this when we're coaching people with to be more effective on social media. You know, so often people view this as a journey with a destination. So I'm doing that when I'm building and coaching my team. You know, I've recruited people, I've onboarded the people, I've mentored and coached the people, and I've helped the people select their training. And now we're done. Now we can get on with the business of doing business. And actually, the idea that I've developed you and now you're going to leave and someone else is going to have to, I'm going to have to go through all that with that person as well. That's the issue here, isn't it? Like we see with social media, people see that developing their profile, developing their network, developing the skills that they need, they get to the end of it and they go, oh, I'm done now. Well, no, you're not done. This is like eating healthily or going to the gym. You know, it's not like you're going to go to the gym for 6 months. You're going to go to the gym 3 times a week, every week, forever, because that's what you need to do. And when you're developing your team, you know, there's the natural flow in and flow out of people as they outgrow you or you outgrow them, or they want something else, or they decide they're having a career break, or they're going to go off to maternity or paternity leave, or they're going to go traveling for a year and take a sabbatical, or they've been ill, or whatever it may be. They have to be replaced by somebody. So this idea of coaching and bringing people up and on board needs to be seen as your role as the manager is the journey, not the destination, isn't it?
Well, because they're not thinking about the lifetime value of the salesperson. They're thinking, well, you're the head of sales, you got 18 months. You're coming in as a sales rep, you got 3 to 6 months to deliver the number. So,
Andy, I love the idea of release. Retain or release. The initial gut reaction I had to that was, where does the blue on the graph grow? We talked about the 4 elements. I don't see that making the first day, although an argument could be made for better hiring if you have a career path plan that you could share with candidates. Does it increase productivity? Does it expedite the ramp? Does it elongate the retention, even with the idea that they will eventually move on? Are they staying longer to be ripe to not only move on, but move up simultaneously? What are your thoughts around that?
I think it's a great question. And so to clarify for viewers, the current situation is the solid blue line, which is at the bottom of the shaded blue. And what the argument from McKinsey and others are saying is actually, if you can get to the dotted line, Rob, that's your lever, and that's the additional value. So that the light blue shading is that additional value that you get. But to answer your question around, retaining people, everybody wants to be developed. Louis Kahn, the world famous architect, held up a brick once in a class and said, "What's this?" And people shout out, "It's a weapon. It's it's a brick. It's it's a doorstop and everything else." And he went, "Actually, Louis Kahn said even a brick wants to be something." And he put up these pictures of these wonderful spires and massive US cathedrals and various other things. And his argument was, if a brick, an inanimate object, wants to be something better than it is and be collective, then doesn't everything else above brick want to be? And that's true. I mean, and I love movies, and I think the human spirit is articulated in some of the things that we do look at as sales coaches. We talked before that, Marshall TV, We Are Marshall, The Rookie, all of those things, Invincible. Great American films that look at people who've gone that extra bit, found that extra inspiration, and perform far better. And you give them a shot, you give them that ability to grow and that nurture, in the full knowledge that they're going to go at some point. They'll continue to stay because you're investing in them, and who doesn't love having an investment in them?
As you were saying people want to be developed, it reminded me. The first tech startup that I worked for, I was building their sales enablement program and helping with the recruiting and onboarding. And we landed candidates above our weight class. We landed candidates that were going up against companies that were better funded, more successful, paying more than we were paying, simply because I could have that conversation with them. Here's our onboarding plan, and here's your career path. And as you hit these benchmarks, this is what you can expect. And the competition didn't have that. And that little impetus, that insight into where you could go here, was the difference between us landing some top candidates, like I said, that were above our weight class, frankly, and not having that success.
Yeah, I like Matt's again comment about balanced scorecards. We talked this morning again about the right KPIs to put into those balanced scorecards. So I think one of the great things to do would be, Rob, through you, to get a few American leaders and a few American students on the next one. And actually, let's have a look and dive into, and if you could just go out in Canada and grab someone that looks like a salesperson and pull them into SalesTV next week, that'd be great. Maybe the person that keeps walking behind you in your hotel room, they're probably, family, but drag them in, call them a salesperson, we'll never know.
They are a salesperson, as it happens. So to me, I think that's a great thing to do, because we've got to explore these ideas and find the best practices and share those with people.
Yeah. I like the idea of the scorecard. I think it's even more powerful when the sales team, the sales force, feel like it's tailored for them, rather than it's just been taken off the shelf, another methodology, another scorecard. It's actually based on them and their business and the job that they need to do and the things that they need to focus on.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think that one of the things that we had identified was that the place that we get the most traction is in the coaching bit that happens at the end, where we're offering a totally individualized service to people. So, this is not because it genuinely tackles your issues. So the issues with your accounts, your territory, your whatever, but also it tackles your own self-limiting beliefs. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I don't know how to tackle this problem. And actually, that's different for every single person. Tim finds it really easy to sell stuff because he's selling into high tech. I'm selling into bio, and that's a really difficult industry. Well, actually, it isn't. It just means you need to develop different skills in a different way to do that. And I think that one of the things that every person needs is that individualized thing that tackles their issues and their barriers, rather than assuming, as you said, Alex, that it's just an off-the-shelf thing. Everybody, sheep dipped, everybody gets the same treatment.
Mm.
I think it's a good comment there from Dan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've all stopped there because it's such a good comment. So I was ready. So what a professional broadcasting crew. It's just like, let's all go that way and look at this.
Well, we're at 45 minutes, which is what we normally run for one of these. So thank you, panel. Thank you, America. Well, North America in all of its forms. And thank you, everybody in the audience, both the watchers and the commenters. And we hope to see you at the same time, the same place next week. And until then, have a great week, everybody, and happy selling.
Bye all. Have a good week.
Bye, everybody.